welcome to this edition of At the Mic. I'm your host, Keith Malinak. Oh my goodness. I am so looking forward to today's conversation, and I will explain why in just a moment. First, I want to let you know that this time a week from now, next Thursday, September 26th, I'll be sitting down with Jovan Pulitzer and discussing how to steal an election, part 3, as we near Election Day 2024. If you missed his 2 previous conversations with me, they are absolutely fascinating. You can find them at youtube.com/atthemic. Just go to the deep dive section, scroll down on that playlist, and get your popcorn and learn a lot. If you joined us for those conversations, you know they are jam-packed and full of information. A lot of it very, very concerning as we head toward Election Day. But there's a lot of good information there as well that we can use to our advantage. So please check that out. How to Steal an Election, parts 1 and 2. We got part 3 a week from now on that deep dive. We'll get into our deep dive today here in just a moment. I want to give you a heads up first that tomorrow on the Friday live stream, I'm going to be hanging out with several Pat heads. My day job is over at Pat Gray Unleashed over at The Blaze, where I produce that program. And 3 members of that audience will be hanging out with me watching animal videos, talking about who knows what. Toby McAvoy, Carol Marks, you know her as Carol Remarks. She has her own show as well. And Fury and Energy, he's the guy. John Swank is his name. He's the one who makes all of the Chewing the Fat intros for Jeff Fisher over there on the show. So John, Carol, and Toby will be a part of tomorrow's Friday live stream. I don't want to delay any longer with getting my guest on here today, all the way from the Great White North. Oh, no, that's Canada. Sorry. The Last Frontier, right? Is that right? Is it?
Yes, that's correct.
Right? Yes, the Last Frontier. Look, I've even got my Alaska flag, the Big Dipper cap today in honor of this episode. I'm telling you what, Ward Clark, thanks for making time here. And folks, you can find him at redstate.com, where he does good work writing. That's what led to our connection that I want to explain here in a moment. He's also on Twitter there at The Great Lander. Be sure to follow him over there, and also over on Rumble, right? You do what is it? Animal Magnetism.
Right. Animal Magnetism Live. On
Tell
Rumble.
us what that is, and then I want to explain how I ran into you.
It's kind of wide ranging. I do anywhere from a 2 to 5 minute video once or twice a week. Sometimes it's about Alaska. Sometimes it's about Alaska politics. Sometimes it's just whatever stream of consciousness thing pops into my head. I did one, for example. I introed one piece with speculating why people always shoot videos in their cars to put up on Twitter and so forth. So I didn't want to sit in my wife's truck in the garage. So instead I decided I'd shoot one sitting on my tractor, because that was the closest I could come. And but that's just it. There's a wide variety of stuff. It's probably mostly Alaska stuff. Some politics, some just life in Alaska. And I preface those bits with, you don't have to be a little bit crazy to live in Alaska, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
Well, I will say that real quick, I have recorded interviews. Actually, when I did an audio only podcast, I recorded interviews inside my truck. You cannot beat it for the soundproof qualities inside a vehicle.
That's a fair point.
Yeah. Now here's, I read something of yours at Red State. I reached out to you, and I thought this would make a good deep dive. But then you and I got to talking, and before I knew it, we were talking about your home state of Alaska so much, I thought, no, I'm going to have Ward on just to talk about Alaska. And I am so looking forward to this, because I got to thinking, the real classic spirit of this country, the United States of America, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this assessment as an outsider, but it feels like the real spirit of America still exists in Alaska far and away more than anywhere else, Texas included, where I am sitting right now. Alaska seems to be the place that still speaks American I don't know if that's making sense there. What do you think as someone who's living up?
Well, yeah, that's probably fair. Although I would say there's probably places in like Wyoming and
Mm,
Idaho and certainly Texas, parts of Texas. I was stationed in Texas. I'm reasonably familiar with the hill
mhm.
country and the piney woods and places like that. But Alaska it's out, outside of Anchorage, which is like so many of our cities, kind of declining.
Mhm.
But there's a saying up here: you can get from Anchorage to Alaska in about 90 minutes, which, if you're going north, is about how long it takes to cross Big Lake Road, where there is a sign that says "Welcome to the real Alaska." And outside of that area, Alaska is full of some of the most independent-minded, leave me alone people that you're ever likely
I'm
to
telling you,
find. A lot of
that's
people
my
live
cup of
out here
tea.
because they want to be, they want to just live their lives and not have government busybodies come and interfere with them. And we do pretty
Speaking my
well with an
language.
effective minarchy. We live, as they say, out in the borough. We don't live in a town. Uh, Law enforcement is limited to the Alaska State Troopers. The borough does not maintain a sheriff's department. There's no sheriffs, no deputies. There's no municipal police. The nearest Alaska State Police barracks is about 30 miles from us. The state police district that we're in might have 2 to 4 officers on evenings, overnights, and weekends on duty at any one time, sometimes more than that. But that district is about the size of the state of Arkansas. So
2 to 4 cops on duty in the size of
yeah,
Arkansas.
as few as that. So we are pretty prepared to take care of ourselves. Not
Yeah,
that it's very
you have to
necessary
be.
very often, because, as I'm fond of saying, up here in the valley, even the hippies have guns.
I love that. By the way, if people want to try to picture where you are in the state as we're talking right now, I made a crude little map there.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
there's been
that's
worse drawings of Alaska.
yeah,
You've got a hand thing
right
going
about
there.
here.
Okay, it's a little different than Michigan.
Yeah. It's different than Michigan or Florida. I mean, we don't want to probably go down that road.
Hold on a second. I wonder if it's Texas, right?
That's
Hey,
yeah,
look, that's
yeah,
working, kind of ish.
yeah. That kind of, you got the Panhandle
It's
there, and
awesome.
a little nudge over by El
So
Paso.
great. So you guys in Alaska, you entered the United States back in just after the Civil War,
Hmm.
when Russia sold, and I think we're going to talk more about this later because I printed up 49 state 49 fun facts about Alaska. Maybe we can go through a lot of these and see if you have some
Sure.
thoughts on these. But I think Seward's Folly is mentioned in there. uh was it I forget what it works out to per acre, maybe a cent an acre, I don't know, but
Yeah,
Russia what
it's
needed the
uh,
cash or something. And
yeah. Well, the Tsarina, I think it was at the time, actually owed a lot of money to all of the rest of Europe,
uh-huh,
and they were hard up for cash, and they had this North American territory that, frankly, at the time, nobody thought was worth anything.
right,
When Seward pushed through the purchase, I mean, people called it Seward's Folly, people call it
Seward's
Seward's
Folly.
Icebox.
Yep.
Then they discovered gold,
They discovered
and
gold and then later oil. Yeah.
and and then later oil and gas and zinc. We've got a lot of mineral resources. The one and then immediately people are coming over Chilkoot Pass in the hundreds and floating down the Yukon. The gold sands at Nome, placer mining all over. There's a town up in east central Alaska that's near a lot of gold mining areas. We actually have a town called Chicken that is up in that general area. It's kind of on the
I
road
like
that
it.
you do to go to Dawson's, Dawson City in the Yukon, which is the start of the Chilkoot Trail.
Okay.
A lot
Okay.
of
Yeah.
history.
Oh man, it's I guess you can call it let's now call it Tsarina's Folly, like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was reading an article once about all that was involved with that. I mean, it's connected to the Civil War and Russia putting ships in ports to kind of show the South that, well, a couple of things, I guess, to kind of flex their muscles, the North, Lincoln, and also I think if it was also to intimidate those that were writing against the draft. I can't remember all of the details there, but one of the things I remember is that you want to talk about corruption. It was the whole bringing Alaska in as part of the United States. There were some people on the take, but boy, it really worked out. It really worked out in our favor, and I'm so glad that it's a part.
Well, I'm certainly happy about it.
Yeah.
Now I hear Putin has made some noises about maybe we should take Alaska back, and our governor made a statement about that. Actually, he said he's pretty sure that there's about 500,000 heavily armed Alaskans that would contest that effort. And you know, the Russians are always good at fighting in the winter, but you know what? We're pretty good with winters up here too. It's not like Napoleon's army coming up from France.
Well, let's before I get to those fun facts, since you brought up Putin and the military, I have an article from 2 days ago, Ward, that I was going to ask you about. I don't know if you guys are hearing anything up there about the U.S. moving soldiers to Alaska Island amid Russian military activity increase in the area. My gosh, so it's I guess it's a remote, desolate island in the Aleutian chain. Are you guys hearing a lot of that up there? And
we know it's happening. Remember, it wasn't all that long ago the Army reinstated an entire airborne division, the 11th Airborne, and they're at Elmendorf, Joint Base, Jayburg, Joint Base Elmendorf Richardson now, which is curious. They restood up a whole, basically a light infantry division and stationed them in Anchorage, and I think it's Attu that they're putting an outpost on.
Is it really? Oh my gosh.
Out there towards the end of the Aleutian chain. And yeah, it's pretty bleak out there. That is, the Japanese in World War II actually held American territory. They held a couple of the Aleutian Islands for a short time.
Nobody knows about this war.
Yeah, they actually invaded the United States territory, and held it for a while. And we kicked them out of there. The conditions were horrendous for everybody involved, but the Japanese particularly found they weren't well equipped for it.
There has to be a movie made, and maybe someone already has, but the capture of Attu Island, and there's a ham radio operator that they captured and tortured to death. And I'm telling you, this is history that people need to know about how Japan, and there were several islands, right? I think some battles.
Yeah, there were, and maybe we can get on with Steven Spielberg and have him do something about that, because as far as I know, there's never been a film made about it. Not even post-war, when they were cranking out World War II films like crazy.
Man, I tell you what. Okay, let me hit this list of fun facts, and you can stop any of these you want to add anything to. But here's a fun fact number one: Alaska is home to 17 of North America's tallest mountains. Wow.
That's
so
right.
17 of the 20 highest peaks in the United
including
States.
Denali, which we called the big guy. Denali, as we go, we can't see it from our house because we're surrounded by forest.
Okay.
But when we go to the post office, which is about 5-6 miles away, there's a spot on the highway where you come up and on a clear day, you see Denali completely dominating the northern horizon. I mean, from here to here, it takes up most of your windshield. It's 150 miles away, and it completely dominates our northern skyline.
Oh my gosh!
People stop and take pictures a lot, right at this one spot where you crest a hill coming into where we go to the post office.
Wow. Okay, so that's a little bit more impressive than my view. I'm about 40 miles away from where the Dallas Cowboys play at AT&T Stadium, but you get up on a hill and you can see it on a clear day. Yeah. Your fun fact's a little bit better than mine. Let's see here. Oh, wait, hold on. I made a graphic here. Dun dun dun. Denali used to be Mount McKinley.
It did, and when they changed that, my wife and I hadn't moved up here yet. When they officially, we were in the process, but we hadn't actually moved, as I recall. When they there was a lot of people upset because it had been named for a president of the United States, like so many things are, and that's good. It's a good tradition to keep up. But everybody in Alaska was already calling it Denali. It's Denali. It's in Denali National Park. Right. The natives have always called it Denali. Most Alaskans that I know have said, "Well, we've always called it Denali. What's the big deal?"
Okay. That's awesome. I mean, I think it's a cooler name anyway.
I mean, it's a
Let's-
fair criticism because there
Yeah.
has been
Yeah.
way too much of this renaming things to
Uh-huh.
eliminate the traditional dead white guys that they're named after. And that's sad, but in this case,
Yeah.
it's kind of a tempest in a teapot.
Yeah. Let's see here. Alaska has more than 100 volcanoes and volcanic
Mhm.
fields. That you don't think about volcanoes too much up there.
Well,
but, I
we're
guess
on the
it's
Ring
a
of Fire.
Ring of Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, we get earthquakes too. Matter of fact, we had
I was
one
gonna ask you that.
about a 3.5 up in the Talkeetna Mountains off to the northeast of us. That we just barely felt it, but
Uh-huh.
we've had a few that rattled the house a little bit, and our
All
house is
right.
built to withstand them. It's earthquake proof.
Good to know. I thought this was fascinating, man. There are more than 3,000 rivers and 3 million lakes in Alaska. Before you expound on this, how when we're and this applies to everywhere. How big does the body of water have to be? Is there a scientific definition to qualify?
There is. I
for
can't
a
tell you
lake?
off the top of my head what it is. It's
Okay.
a certain number of acres surface area. And,
Okay. Wow.
and yeah, well, most of our lakes aren't even named.
Okay.
But
Gotcha.
some of them are. And 3 million. Minnesotans like to muster some hubris about their 10,000 lakes. Well, my message to Tim Waltz on that is Minnesota can suck it. We've got over 3 million.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, what is that? A land of 1,000 lakes, right? Is that what that is?
10,000.
10,000
Yeah,
lakes.
I grew up
Oh my
in Northeast Iowa,
gosh.
so right across the border was those
Yeah.
people.
3 million. Trump's 10,000 any day, or 100, whatever the hell it was. I said 10,000. Let's see here. Okay. Alaska's largest lake is Lake. What is this? Iliamna? Is that right?
Iliamna. I think
Iliamna.
that's how
Okay.
you pronounce it.
It's 77 miles long, and that means it's as wide as the state of Connecticut.
Mhm.
Ooh. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. It says it's home. It could be home to a legendary monster. Oh,
Yeah,
nice little Loch
color me
Ness.
skeptical about that.
Okay.
Until somebody produces, some dead body or something. It's like the whole Bigfoot thing. I have a good friend up here who does a lot of work for us actually, who is big into Bigfoot and all that. And like, when someone brings in a dead one, then I'll believe it.
Then you'll
My
believe it.
background
That's
is
fair.
biology and a field zoology, actually, my undergraduate degree. And
Huh.
when you're talking about an animal that size, you're not talking about just a couple of them running around. You got to have a population. And
Yeah.
that means in the thousands. It's just not that
Wow.
easy to hide.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. Especially now with cameras everywhere, right?
Right.
Okay. Alaska has more coastline than the rest of the U.S. combined. More than
Including Hawaii.
34, including Hawaii. Wow.
Including Hawaii.
You guys have more than 34,000 miles of coastline. For perspective, the number 2 state is Florida with 8,000. So
Mhm.
you guys have more than 4 times as Florida. It's incredible.
Well, all the fjords, you've got a lot of jagged coastline. And that complicates things. Not sure they measure all-
14.2% of your state is water. It's probably
Mhm.
on them lakes, huh? Okay.
Lakes and rivers. We live in the Susitna Valley, and the Susitna is a big, big river. It's a wild river. A lot of people, boat on the Susitna, but you don't want to use an outboard with a standard propeller on it. People use jet impellers because there's a lot of gunk in the water. There's a lot of sandbars, a lot of driftwood. These are wild rivers. They aren't maintained in any way, except here and there where they go through a town. There's some riprap on the banks for erosion, but mostly they're just wild. And you'll be changing a lot of shear pins on your outboard if you run a prop. So people tend to run jet impellers.
So
And I used to trust me. I used to boat on the Upper Mississippi when I was a kid. I used to hunt ducks out there a lot, and the Mississippi's the same way. I was changing shear pins sometimes 3 or 4 times a day. I carried a couple dozen of them with me.
This is me acting like I know what a shear pin is. Right. That's crazy. No.
Picture the propeller on the bottom of an outboard motor.
Uh-huh.
It sits on a shaft, and there is a kind of a pot metal pin that goes through and holds that propeller on the shaft.
Okay. Okay.
And so if the propeller hits something, that pin breaks.
Yep.
It's a weak link, and the prop spins free on the shaft, but that way it doesn't go up and tear up all the gears on the bottom end of your outboard motor.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Now I got you. Okay. So I don't know why this just crossed my mind, but I remember when we had our phone conversation a while back, we talked about, and you sent me a video of you discussing what's the awesome event where they launch cars off the cliffs.
You can see I did a video on that. The Glacier View car launch every
Car
4th of
launch.
July. We covered it. I actually covered it for Red State this last July. There were over 10,000 people there from all over people, not just all over the country. I was talking to a guy. I didn't get it on video, sadly, but I was talking to a guy from Poland who was vacationing in Alaska.
Oh wow!
They launched 40 cars off a cliff over the Matanuska River. Now,
Oh, cool.
Glacier View is on the Glen Highway. It's about 40, 50 miles east of Palmer. Now, that might be the last year they do it, because sadly, the Matanuska is undercutting the bank where the spectators sit for the car launch. So they might not have room to put all those spectators and still safely chuck cars off the cliff.
You're saying the river itself is doing this?
Yeah. It's on
Gosh.
the outside of a bend in the Matanuska, which again is a pretty good sized river, and it's undercutting the bank, and they keep trying to fill it. But, Alaska makes a lot of human efforts look kind of puny, including those big glacial rivers.
You started to say this may be the last year they do it. Honestly, the way I thought that sentence was going to end, Ward, was environmentalists don't like us launching, old rusty cars into the pristine wilderness. Do you get a lot of pushback on something like that event, or environmentalists up there that don't like that way of life?
Oh, I'm sure some don't, but it gets cleaned up. I mean, they come through and with the bulldozer was already sitting off to the side, and because I asked a guy, I was
Okay.
they're talking to a guy, and he said, yeah, we'll gather them up. They all get hauled off to Wasilla for scrap. There's a scrap yard there. Everything will be cleaned up within a day or two.
Okay.
So it gets, and these are people who live there. They don't want a bunch of junk sitting around any more than anybody else does.
Okay. So since you've been up there, what's the coldest you've been and the hottest that you have been at say your house?
Last winter, we had 2 mornings when I came over to the office, and we've got indoor outdoor thermometer in the house and one in the office, and both of them read 32 below, which is a little unusual. In December and January, it's usually 0, maybe 5 or 10 below, but 32 below is kind of exceptional for South Central, because we're close enough to Cook Inlet that we still get some moderating effect from the ocean. Up in the interior, up around Fairbanks, it gets a lot colder than that at times. As a matter of fact, the university up at Fairbanks, they have kind of a tradition where as you enter the campus, there's a sign and it has the temperature on it. And these kids, it's a tradition every year. They go out with snow boots and bathing suits and have their picture taken, the girls in bikinis and the guys in swim trunks, all gathered around the sign with the temperature reading 58 below 0.
Oh.
And you can find those pictures. It's a thing those kids do every year. And
do they wait for the cold front to come, like the first cold front of the winter to come through blasting?
I presume so, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
As for the hottest, I think the hottest I've ever seen it here was 84 degrees. And bear in mind, nobody has air conditioning up here, because why would you? And so 84 degrees, and houses like our house and our office, most of our structures are built so that you get a lot of passive solar warming. There's lots of glass, and boy, a house and the office got hot that day.
See, now, okay, you say the 32 below, even, or the 50, whatever below. And I think I love the cold, but I don't love that kind of cold.
Yeah.
But then you said 84 is as hot as you've been. And I'm looking down here at my calendar. It's September 19th. And then I'm leaning over here to my thermometer there here in Texas on September 19th. And currently it's 97 degrees outside.
Oh, yeah. I was stationed in San Antonio. I remember that all too well.
I don't like it. I don't like 97 degrees on the 4th of July. Certainly not in late September. Give me the cold, honestly. Okay.
I will gladly spend the rest of my life in a place where it doesn't often get above 75 degrees.
Yeah. Well, that's yes, please. Okay. I love this fun fact about Alaska. Alaska has coastlines on 3 different seas: the Arctic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and the Bering Sea. You can kind of couple that fact with one I saw earlier that says the northernmost, the easternmost, and the westernmost points in the U.S. are found in Alaska. I love that kind of stuff, man.
And there are places in the Aleutians where you can, on a clear day, see the Russian coast.
Oh, nice.
As you know, and as opposed to Tina Fey lampooning Sarah Palin, saying, "I can see Russia from my house," and I could ask that. Can you see Russia from your house? Well,
most people think that that Sarah Palin said that, actually.
Yeah,
and it just
and actually, Sarah's still pretty well known down in Wasilla, and matter of fact, a buddy of mine actually spoke to her in the Walmart in Wasilla. She was buying ammo.
Nice. So she still lives there then? Okay.
Yeah, she's. I gather she's gone a lot of the year, but doing various political work and so forth. But no, she still has that house on the lake in Wasilla. Her ex-husband Todd lives up in Big Lake now.
Okay.
And
all right.
She's apparently very personable. She'll stop and chat with anybody.
Oh, very cool.
But
very
yeah,
cool.
She reportedly had seen that sketch where Tina Fey was impersonating her, and she actually thought it was pretty funny.
Well,
said, yeah, she's got me down pretty good.
Yeah. Oh boy. Okay, let's see here. This would obviously make sense that most U.S. glaciers. Oh wait, hold on. No. I don't want to move on to that to this one yet. I wanted to ask you, and I'm gonna ask the room here as well. I came up with a fun fact about Texas, and most people, when I say this, they roll their eyes and they say, no, this doesn't count. But when I saw this, Alaska has coastlines on 3 different seas. I have a little trivia question for people, and I've already ruined it by telling you it's a Texas fun fact. But what U.S. state is in the Mountain Time Zone and touches the Atlantic Ocean? Texas. Yep. Boom. See, because El Paso, you know this, and the Gulf, and people look at me like, no, they touch the Gulf of Mexico, which is a part of the Atlantic Ocean. So if you want to,
people don't think about that, but El Paso, if you leave Denver and drive due south on I-25, you come to Las Cruces, but it's not that far, and El Paso, it's in the Mountain Time Zone.
See, so okay, so my Texas fun fact is Ward Clark approved. You're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Most U.S. glaciers.
Like I said, I was stationed in Texas briefly. I was there for twice for a matter of months at each time in San Antonio. That's where the Army Medical Department is, and that's what I did in the Army. So,
okay.
I was in and out of there several times.
27,000 glaciers in the state of Alaska. That is jaw-dropping. How big do those have to be to qualify to be a glacier?
That I couldn't tell you. I think it just has to be a moving ice field. The Matanuska Glacier, that's where they do the Glacier View car launch, is big enough that you can see it from 5 or 6 miles away on the highway. It's nice. Pretty huge. We've got several right around here. Up in Denali, of course, has got several big glaciers on it. And I've always struggled with the pronunciation of that. It's always pronounced glacier, but it's spelled glacier. And maybe as a student of English, that's always confounded me a little bit. But I'll go with the vernacular.
Okay, yeah. 3% of the state is covered by glaciers. Mm-hmm. And you already talked about how seismically active it is there. I love this line here from my cheat sheet. The Alaska Earthquake Center has reported more than 150,000 earthquakes in the last 5 years alone.
Yeah. We get lots of little ones, 1.2, 1.6 that you can't even feel.
Well,
We've
31 of
had the
those.
house rattled a couple of times.
Yeah, it
but
looks
nothing.
like, according to this, it's like you have about 5 or 6 a year that register 6 or higher on the Richter scale.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, in 1964, Anchorage was almost leveled by an earthquake, a huge earthquake. And the town of Valdez actually had to be moved about a mile farther away from the ocean. They moved the whole town because of earthquake damage and liquefaction of the soil and so forth. They had to move it onto more solid ground.
Wow. Wow. Okay, man. Now you got me thinking of the Exxon Valdez, and
Yeah.
is that? I mean, nature healed itself pretty quickly up there.
It did.
Yes.
Well, and there was a lot of cleanup. Exxon did a lot of cleanup in the area, and but yeah, things in Valdez now are back to what they were before that. Instead of oil, the town just smells like fish, like it always has. There's a lot of commercial and commercial recreational fishing out of Valdez.
I tell you what,
We
this
haven't
next
been
fun.
fishing out of Valdez, but I guess the fishing's really, really good. We usually go down to Seward or Homer to go out on for ocean fishing.
Of all the 49 facts I have here about Alaska, this may be my favorite one, Ward. Alaska has no poison ivy or poison oak. Yes, please. And no fire ants, right? Let's go.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But we do have mosquitoes that show up on air traffic radar. I want to say there's 27 different kinds of mosquito in Alaska.
Oh,
and
wait,
some of
how
them
many?
are 27, I think it is, off the top of my head.
Crap.
And but their season is kind of limited. It's mostly June and maybe the first week or two in July that there a lot of them around, and that's once you get past that, it's not so bad. I see someone commented Alaska has no snakes. Alaska has no reptiles of any kind, unless you count sea turtles that sometimes are found off the coast. Our part of Alaska only has one amphibian, and it's the wood frog, and we have that because they can actually freeze solid and then thaw out in the spring and reactivate.
That is wild, dude. That is wild.
That's not friendly territory for cold-blooded animals.
I like this. Mosquitoes are the Alaska state bird. Okay. Okay, I gotta talk about as we're talking about these mosquitoes and snakes and stuff. The thing that I hate more than anything on the planet would be spiders. I'm sure you have plenty of those up there. Yes.
Oh yeah. We've got spiders.
Now we're good. Let's see. Nation's 2 largest forests are located in Alaska. My gosh. So the Tongass, right? Is that Tongass? 16.8 million acre forest.
Yeah.
And then what's the Chugach? I can't pronounce this.
Chugach.
4.8 million. How many acres is Alaska off the top of your head? Do you know?
Just off the top of my head, I don't know, but I can find out real quick.
I'm gonna find out. Here we go. 420 million acres.
Yeah.
So you've got forests, just 2 forests alone, over 20 million acres, 22 million acres almost, just in those 2.
Alaska is it's hard for a lot of people to get a grip of the scale. I live here, and it's hard for me to get a grip on the scale of Alaska. You can drop Texas, California, and Montana, the next 3 biggest states, into Alaska and have room left over. I describe Alaska always. If people want to know, can you sum up Alaska in 3 words? I would say vast, wild, and free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around how big Alaska really is.
Well, I mean, to your point, how big it is. Here's another fun fact. If I can find it again. Yeah, here we go. Alaska's population density is 1 person per square mile. Yes, please.
Yeah, we've got about 733,000 people, and about half of those live in the Anchorage area, the Anchorage metropolitan area.
Oh, wow.
So we're scattered pretty thin in the rest of the state.
Yeah.
And there's, of course, vast areas of the state where there's just almost nobody lives.
I bet. I bet. I want to revisit that fun fact you just mentioned at the onset here for those that may have tuned in late. You said you got about 2 to 4 police officers on duty at any given time in a police
on evenings
zone.
and weekends at least.
Evenings and weekends, right?
Yeah.
And they're responsible for an area the size of Arkansas.
Yeah. Yeah. On the other hand, I have a really good friend, old medical industry buddy of mine, and this is going to seem odd given what I do for a living and my proclivities. But my buddy is he lives in Richmond, Virginia. He is a deep blue state progressive Democrat.
Okay.
Still one of my best friends, and we've had this weird kind of Oscar Madison, Felix Unger friendship going for about 15 years now. And this is a guy who thought Barack Obama was too far to the right to suit him. He didn't really like that. But he
hold on.
he
What do y'all
me,
talk about? Not politics, I would imagine.
No, actually we do, because
Okay,
we have argued politics late into the night sometimes over beers because neither of us takes it personally. We just don't agree, and that's it.
Yep.
But there's there's lots of other stuff we do have in common. Anyway, when I told him about the police, he's like, "Aren't you worried about crime?" And I said, "If the fastest way I can think of to get shot in Alaska is to kick in someone's door in the middle of the night."
Right. Yep. Okay. That's we're the police, friend.
Yeah. We take care of ourselves out here in the borough.
You have to, yeah. Let's see here. Alaska means the Great Land, hence your Twitter handle at the Great Lander. You're a great follow.
Twitter and Truth Social.
Oh, Truth Social as well. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Truth Social and Twitter at the Great Lander. Great follow. I would recommend people do that. The name comes from the Aleut word Alyeska, which is Alyeska, Alyeska.
Yeah. The original meaning was either the land against which the sea makes a noise or just the Great Land. And of course, the first one's too long to really, it's not really pithy. So the Great Land is what stuck.
So a 13-year-old named Benny Benson back in 1926 designed the state flag, which is right here, just a Big Dipper there.
The Big Dipper and the North Star.
So y'all had that ready to go when you became a state in 1959.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. We got lots of fun facts, and I know that Tamara was kind of tongue in cheek there. Mosquitoes are the Alaska state bird, but actually it is the the ptarmigan, but it's got a P at the beginning. Ptarmigan, what is?
Yeah, the P is silent. The willow ptarmigan is our state bird, and the ptarmigan is basically a grouse.
Okay.
It's a game bird, and they are delicious. I like hunting birds. Moose, if you shoot a moose, you have several days of backbreaking work ahead of you. If you shoot a grouse, you can put it in your game pocket and go look for another one.
Wait a minute. Tell us, you have a fun story about how people treat moose up there. I think one of the fun facts was okay, so Kodiak bears can weigh 1,500 pounds. Moose can grow to 1,600 pounds, and the antlers may span up to 6 feet wide. Wow!
Oh, yeah. They're very huge. We have one. The last 2 winters, they spend most of the summer up in the hills. But in the winters, they come down, into the valleys. It's a little bit warmer, and also they like hanging around in human areas because we plow the snow off of our driveways and our parking areas and our roads, and it's a lot easier for them to walk than trying to walk through 3 or 4 feet of snow. So we've had a bull hanging around. We named him. His name's Bullwinkle because why not? And he's hung around the last 2 winters. He's eating the black ash trees that I'm trying to grow behind the office building, which makes me annoyed with him. But it's an acceptable excuse to be late to work in Alaska if you go in and say, "I'm sorry, I'm late. There was a moose in the driveway," and your boss will go, "Oh, all right." And our office where I sit right now is across the driveway from our house. It's about I suppose 15, 20 yards between the back door of our house and the office door. And in the winter, my wife and I have to stop and look around to make sure he's not in the driveway or, in our big parking area before we walk across, because once in a while, a moose will just decide he doesn't like you being there.
Oh.
And an 1800 pound animal with those big hooves can be really nasty if he just decides he's just going to come kick the hell out of you because he's irritated. They're not afraid of anything. They have no natural enemies. A full-grown, healthy adult moose. Wolves won't mess with them. Bears won't mess with them. They're just not afraid of anything.
Right. Wow. Moose meat. What's it taste like?
It's very good. And of course, there's a big variety. It depends on how you handle it. Some people don't handle the animal very well. They don't get the meat bled out right away. They don't get it field dressed right away, and then it gets kind of gamey and tough. But properly handled, it's really good. It's kind of like beef, but not quite. It's hard to describe. I always tell people, well, it tastes like moose. If you've ever had elk or venison, it's got a little bit of that to it. And but we like it. My wife made moose burritos a while back, and they were amazing.
Oh, wow. All right. And by the way, one more fact on the Kodiak bear that I forgot to mention. I can't even imagine this. Up to 10 feet tall on those things. Holy crap.
They don't get the grizzly, and they're a subspecies of the grizzly. We have grizzlies and black bears in our area, but the grizzlies generally don't get that big. A big one will be a big boar will be 700-800 pounds, which is still, I mean, they could rip the door off of a truck. They can bite through a moose's femur. They're incredible. They're basically, and they can run 35 miles an hour. They're basically 600-pound meat missiles.
So moose versus a bear, though, you say advantage bear. Then is that what we're saying?
It depends. I gather that they tend to give each other kind of a wide berth. Now, bears eat a lot in the spring. Bears eat a lot of moose calves. It's a real high mortality thing for moose calves. Bears, because the mother will hide them in some brush and go off to eat, and the bear finds it. A bear has an incredible sense of smell. They're just amazing.
You talked about your driveway area where you're looking across to the office, and before you go out there, and you got to look for moose. I presume you're looking for bear. You're looking for anything out there. I just want to know, in the dead of winter, when it is nasty cold out there, how quick of a sprint is it? And do you ever think, you know what, I'm just going to build an enclosed walkway connecting the two buildings? Is it that bad out there?
It's tempting. You bundle up just to walk that 20 yards.
I bet.
My wife comes over, and my wife is a little tiny woman. She's not very cold resistant, and she bundles up like an Eskimo, a scarf and big huge mittens just to walk that little walk. I'm a little more cold tolerant, but I'll still wear a parka and my Sorels just to come over to the office. But sometimes you also, and this tends to happen more in the winter. We've got tens of thousands of acres of state and borough land right behind our neighborhood. It's just wild. If you walk east out of our neighborhood, you won't cut another road for 30 miles. And there are wolves back there, and mostly in the winter, but once in a while I'll come out and it'll be this crisp cold, and it's dark in the winter when I come over to the office. In the middle of the winter, the sun comes up about 10:15 in the morning and sets about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But there's been several times I've come outside to go to the office, and I can hear the wolves singing back in that borough land. And I'll stand out there for 5 or 10 minutes and listen to them, because it's one of the most beautiful sounds you'll ever hear. And they're around. We've seen one waiting to cross the highway, actually. We came around the corner and a bend in the highway, and there's an animal standing alongside the road. And my wife goes, "Oh, somebody's dog got it." "Oh, that's not a dog." It was a big male wolf, and you cannot mistake one of those things for a dog.
Yeah.
They're very closely related, but you can't mistake one of those for a dog. They've got that huge head and the long legs and the big paws. He was very clearly a wolf, and he was just calmly standing there waiting to cross the road.
I'm sorry, I'm still hung up on the 10:30 sunrise to 3 in the
Yeah.
afternoon sunset. I mean, my goodness. Hey, with you guys being up so far north and satellites hugging around the equator, is it difficult? And maybe not you since you're south central, but maybe it is. Do you have trouble getting satellite signals up there, or is that not an issue till you get further
The
north?
only experience I have with that is when we lived in the lower 48, I subscribed to Sirius XM because all of the different programs, endless programs. They had a Grateful Dead channel, which I listened to a lot because I'm an old Deadhead. Seen him in concert, all that.
That's
But
great.
you're too far north here. We canceled our Sirius XM because we couldn't get it. You can't receive it. Satellite phones work here. Apparently, the Sirius XM satellites are mostly around, more or less around the equator. Satellite phones work up here. They apparently have broader coverage. GPS works just fine.
Man,
But
if
I
you
know
would,
I do know the satellite and Starlink. Elon Musk's Starlink is starting to start up here. But
okay,
like Sirius XM, no, that you
that
can't get it.
that is so sad because if there is any state in the union that would benefit, considering how far apart you guys are from radio stations and TV stations, I would
Mhm.
imagine. I'm just going to assume that you're not picking up a lot of those
No,
where you're at.
we have a
You would think
Roku
that,
box. That's our that's our television connection.
man, of any place where satellite radio is practical, it would be Alaska.
Oh yeah, yeah, it
The
would be
the
great to
the
have it,
Yeah, my gosh. Okay,
especially
State
for a
Sport of
guy in my
Alaska.
line of work who, I try and stay on top of everything that's going on in politics, and
Right. That's got to
it's
be
a little
difficult.
difficult. I spend a lot of time at the computer, flipping from news site to news site, trying to keep up with things and find things to write about, which is usually kind of interesting because my work model is I surf the internet until something ticks me off, and then I go write about it.
So, I mean, I'm sorry to sound naive here, but since we're talking about technology and what you have access to up there, are 5G towers? Is that a typical thing there for cell
It's
service?
starting to be
Okay.
down in Wasilla. We get 5G. Up here in the borough. It's still 4G.
Hmm.
But there are towers around. We have fairly decent, as long as you're near the highway, you've got fairly decent cell coverage. There's a gap between Talkeetna and Trapper Creek, and as you go north on the Parks Highway, which is Alaska Highway 3, if you go north out of Trapper Creek, you start running out, and there's some big
Okay.
stretches up there where there's no coverage. But where
I
we are,
can't.
we're fine. We've got 4G covering, and if you go down to Wasilla, it's about 30 miles south of us. There you can get 5G.
You just
Funny
reminded
story:
me.
when I first moved up here, I was still running my consulting business, and a new project startup. We were in a Zoom call, and it did one of those things where they said, "Go around and introduce yourselves," and I said, gave my name and my background, and I'm calling in from Alaska, and one of the people in the Zoom call says, "Oh, Alaska, do you guys have internet up there?" And I looked at him and I said,
Oh
"I'm going to
no.
let you think about that for a moment."
Oh no. Oh no.
He's like, "Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
bro.
yeah, I guess you do."
No,
I said,
I
"Yeah,
no,
I mean, we got
I
electricity, we got hot and cold running water. I mean, we're
no, I drove to
all on top of
Seattle
this."
for this Zoom call.
Yeah,
Um, you made me remember something there. I just saw a meme yesterday. I don't know if somebody tagged me on this or I just stumbled across it, but it said something to the effect of if you think you're gonna if you're going on a hike, you think you're not familiar with it. The best thing you could do is maybe record a voicemail greeting that gives your location and what day it is and what time, so that if your battery dies or you end up without a cell signal, at least people will hear your voicemail and know where you were last were. I don't know.
yeah, that's not a bad
Liked it.
idea.
Yeah. State Sport of Alaska is dog mushing. Hold on a second. Is the Iditarod, is that still happen? No. Did they
Oh yeah,
take that
yeah.
Okay, still
It's a
okay.
big deal. A lot of
Okay.
people fly up from the 48 to watch the Iditarod kick off.
Okay.
It starts, well, technically it starts in Anchorage, but between Anchorage and the valley, there's there's not a lot of places where you can have the dogs on the ground. And no, I do not have my own sled dog team, although I have a neighbor. I have a neighbor right up to the north that does.
Wow.
And we have several friends that mush.
That's
so
cool.
the actual dogs on dogs in traces parts of the Iditarod starts a 5-10 minute drive from where we live, and goes, of course, it ends up over in Nome, and there's a northern route and a southern route that they alternate from year to year, and it's a big deal. A lot of people fly up here to see the Iditarod off, and we follow it. It's one of our major annual events, and we know the mushers. We like a lot of people in 48 will follow their local football team or whatever. Up here, it's our mushers, or high school hockey is another big thing, because there's no professional sports teams.
Right.
So
right.
the high
Hang
school
on.
teams get a lot of attention, and I can kind of see
Bet.
that. I'm not a sports guy, but
Mhm.
but it's a little different in high school. These are our kids and our neighbors' kids, and it's a little closer to us.
Okay, but I'm getting a little concerned here, because one day I might end up in Alaska, and I've said this often on Pat Gray Unleashed and on this show. I don't need much. I could have a shack on a mountainside. Most likely it'll be Montana or Idaho. Alaska's still in the running, but I have to be able to watch football, my teams, on satellite. But hang on a second. You just told me that SiriusXM radio doesn't work up there. How's TV, bro?
Now, when we bought our house, it did have a direct TV dish on it. We chose not to have the service hooked back up. So apparently that does work. I haven't. My wife and I don't watch much television.
Mhm.
We watch a lot of movies for recreation, but we don't watch much television.
But you have
I've
the
never
internet, so
been-
you can get streaming that way now too. So
Yeah. And I grew up in Northeast Iowa. We were the first family to live in our valley since before the Civil War, and we didn't get electricity till I was 14 in this valley in Alameda County. And my dad hated television. He didn't want one in the house. My mom finally talked him into buying one. But I didn't grow up with television, so I never really got hooked into it.
And that was in Iowa, you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Until Dad died, he kept a small TV in his. My mom was bedridden in the later part of her life a lot, so she watched a lot of television. But Dad had a small TV next to his chair in their living room. He would turn it on for 2 minutes in the morning to get the weather, and then he never touched it again. That was his TV exposure.
It's a practical man right there. Yeah.
And he had been a farmer most of his life, and those guys live and die by the weather, so he always had to know what the weather was.
Boy, you just reminded me. So my stepdad grew up outside of Lincoln, Nebraska, way out in the country, and I remember we visited the summer of 1988, and the family that was renting from my stepdad, I guess. Anyway, and they lived in his childhood home or something. I don't know. Anyway, they had just put in 1988. I mean, this is farm life. They just put in their first ever shower head. It's just interesting, it's a different way of life, all different parts of the country.
We ran a sand point down. That's how you drill it. That's the cheap way to make a well. We pushed a sand point down, and we had cold water for about 2 years before we got a gas-fired hot water heater.
Wow.
So you had water in the tap, but it was only cold.
Right.
But it was great. My folks had 60 acres of timber. There was a trout stream running through the Northeast Iowa is very hilly and lots of hardwood timber.
Okay.
And dairy farms. It's a beautiful part of the state.
Sure. Yeah. I tell you, these facts about Alaska are just mind-blowing. I want everyone to really picture this. Alaska has the lowest population density in the nation. Okay, Ward just said earlier it's about 1 per square mile, right? But you said half of the population is in Anchorage, so that would mean that really outside of that, it's probably much more than 1 per square mile. But listen to this fun fact: if Manhattan, New York, had the same population density as Alaska, only 16 people would live on Manhattan Island.
Yeah, and it'd probably be a lot saner and safer place if that was true.
Well said.
I've only been to New York City once. I walked around Times Square because I was in the area, and someone said you should go in and at least see it. And I was there for a couple hours and I left.
Yeah,
I
as
don't do
one
well
who,
in cities. My wife and I just spent a couple days in Seattle because the VA, she has a medical thing that the VA wanted her to see a specialist in Seattle. So we flew down there. And
mm,
when you've lived out like we do for a while and you go back to a city, even Anchorage, it's noisy and it stinks and it's crowded. And you just, it's
I'm with
hard
you
to
100%.
take.
I used to commute to Manhattan Island every day, and it was worst part of my day. So how long does it take to fly from Anchorage to Seattle just to get to the mainland?
We actually flew through Denver and connected. It's
Okay.
about 5 hours to Denver. I suppose it's probably 3.5 to 4 hours to Seattle.
All right.
If you flew nonstop, it's 5 hours to Denver and 2.5 to Seattle from Denver, but that's neither here nor there. And the thing is, most of the flights to the 48 out of Anchorage are late night flights because it enables people to make sure they get to their connecting airport early enough that they won't miss a connection. So our flights to, like, when we go to Denver to see our kids there, they take off like 11:55, 11:55 at night, and we arrive at 7 in the morning in Denver. And that makes for a long day because I don't sleep well on airplanes.
Yeah, me either.
You just basically end up sitting up the whole time.
Yeah. So right now, you're 4 hours behind New York. Do you guys do you do the daylight saving thing?
Oh, we do. Yeah. I think it's a stupid idea, but we do it.
Me too. This next stat, this actually surprises me that there's not a higher majority of men. Only 52% of Alaskans are men, the highest percentage of any state. I honestly would have thought it had been more like 60 to 40, but I just.
Oh, it was, back, a few decades ago. I've heard numbers as high as 2 to 1. And that's why dance hall girls often ended up respectably married and matrons of the communities because there were so few women around. A woman could literally change her reputation just by marrying the right guy. It didn't matter that she'd been a soiled dove before, and nobody cared. And also, like I said, Alaska's a place where we all mind our own business.
Yeah. I love that, though. Dance hall girls and soiled doves. Two phrases never uttered on this show, but I'm so glad that we just did. Alaska natives make up 18% of the state's population. So, okay, hang on a second. Does this mean, because the follow-up to that is there are 224 federally recognized Alaska Native tribes and 20 indigenous languages spoken in the state. So they're saying 18% of the population is Native American, or you know what I mean? Like, they're not saying native born, huh?
Native American. Well, up here we tend to just say native, and it's a little different. The natives up here, we don't have a reservation system like lower 48 does, which I don't like that system. They just seem to be breeding grounds for poverty and substance abuse.
It's the truth.
You've got the Indians and then you've got the Inuit, which are ethnically distinct. So the two groups, but they don't. Instead of reservations, the tribes have basically corporations. They own a lot of land, and you don't want to be caught picking berries on the tribes, on the natives' land, because they get a little peevish about it.
I bet.
They'll just run you off. So, get the hell out of here. You're on our land. But it works pretty well. We're all part of the community. We all get along pretty well. The bush communities, some of the small native villages, there is always a problem with alcoholism and other substance abuse, and I think a lot of that is because of the isolation. Some of these small communities, they're out in the middle of nowhere, but that's just my theory.
No,
I know that it happens, and it's kind of sad, but we're social creatures. We're accustomed to being or around other people. Although I guess my wife are exceptions to that, because sometimes a week, 10 days will go by and we don't see anybody except each other.
Oh,
But we kind of like it that way.
I like it. Yeah. I love this. Alaska, approximately 50 miles from Russia. That's interesting. That's fun. Let's see here. Barrow, the northernmost city, it just got a name change recently as well. I really...
It is Utqiagvik.
Boom. Say that again. You nailed it, man.
Utqiagvik.
Wow.
That was the original name for the area that the Inuit, and I think it's Yupik up there.
Okay,
I think that's
so
the Yupik area.
So let's do this real quick. Oh, okay, now we're 98 degrees down here in Dallas, Fort Worth.
Oh.
What is the temperature there where you live in South Central?
39 at the moment.
39. That's what it is in Barrow right now.
Yeah,
39. Gosh, man, you're getting snow tomorrow in Barrow.
Oh yeah.
And I don't say that as a sign of disrespect. I just can't even begin to pronounce it.
We will have down here in South Central, we will have our first frost before the end of September, and mid-October we'll have snow starting, and the snow will be here till the end of May.
If I ever get up to Alaska, I have to alert you, because I want to hang out with you, man. I want to get the Alaska experience. It won't be anytime soon, but one of these days, man. Just the more we talk about this state, the more I'm just.
No, we're not going anywhere. You could not drag my wife and I out of Alaska with a tractor.
What's the best time of year to visit up there? Middle of the summer, I'd imagine.
Yeah, June or the first couple of weeks in July. After that, it starts getting rainier. I know that's the bug season, but it's the prettiest time of year.
Mm-hmm.
About mid-July, you start getting more rain. We have a beautiful sunny, clear day today, but usually in September it rains a lot.
So they can't really predict beyond a half an hour or day or two, right, on the Northern Lights. Like, how far out do they make those forecasts?
My wife has an app on her phone that actually forecasts about, I think it's up to about 12 hours out. And it seems to be fairly accurate. We've seen some beautiful auroras from right here in the house. I've gone out in the driveway and photographed them. I've got a small folder of aurora photos. The farther north of you go, of course, the more likely you are to see them and the more impressive they are to be. Fairbanks, they've got some beautiful displays. Matter of fact, there's a place called Chena Hot Springs. It's up northeast of Fairbanks. Where you can literally sit in the hot spring with a drink and watch the auroras. And we haven't done it, but it's supposed to be just an amazing experience.
I need to do that. So what's the best way to get to Fairbanks? I guess you could fly there, right? I mean,
there's I know some of the airlines have flights directly into Fairbanks. If you fly into Anchorage, it's about a 4-hour drive. From Anchorage to Fairbanks, and it's a gorgeous drive.
Okay, yeah. You live in South Central Alaska. How often, like, what percentage of the year would you say that you're able to walk outside and see the Northern Lights above you?
Oh, maybe a third of the year, I'm guessing. Right about now is the time when we're dark long enough that they're noticeable. Of course, in the middle of the summer, like we talked earlier about the Glacier View car launch, and part of the reason they do that is because the 4th of July really isn't a good time to have fireworks, because it doesn't really get dark. The sun goes down below the horizon, but it still lights up the sky, and we have kind of a twilight. And on the summer solstice, the sun sets like at 11:55 at night, almost midnight, and it's up again at 3:15 in the morning. So that's the other side of the winter thing we were talking about.
Right.
And north of the Arctic Circle, of course, there's times in the winter where it doesn't come up at all.
Okay. Now that might drive me a little bit nuts. Tell me, does everyone have blackout blinds there?
Well, yeah, a lot of people do. Yeah. We've kind of gotten used to it. We've got curtains, but not necessarily blackouts. But there is a thing called seasonal affective disorder. Some people, especially the winters, get to them when it's so dark for so long. and it's a psychological thing, and apparently it makes people a little bit tetchy, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like cabin fever. You know, you're
Right.
you're feeling
Okay.
just too hemmed in too much of the year. We don't. My wife and I don't have any problem with it.
Sure. Yeah. Almost 1/3 of the state is in the Arctic Circle. I mean,
Hmm.
that's hilarious. Let's see. Oh, wait, hold on. Is the Arctic Circle, is that the same as the tree line? There's no
No,
trees that grow north.
no.
No.
The
Okay.
tree line is, of course, it's partly altitude dependent too. You've been to Colorado. I
Right.
mean, you can go above tree line in Colorado.
Yeah.
The
That's
Arctic
fair. Yeah.
Circle, as I understand it, is the point at which there is times in the, like at the winter solstice where the sun doesn't rise.
Oh, I have
Yeah,
never paused to think what makes the Arctic Circle. And then when I asked the question, I thought, oh, I wonder if that's a tree line. No, say that again. That's fascinating. So,
as I understand it, that's the point at which there is basically at least a few days where the sun does not rise above the horizon.
that is
Even in the middle of winter here, we get 3-4 hours of sunlight. Now the sun just traces a low arc around across the southern horizon, and it doesn't even rise above our trees. So we just see the sunlight through the trees for a few hours, and it's gone again.
man, I thought it was crazy. If anybody tuned in is familiar with the Wildcat Hills and the Panhandle of Nebraska, it's south of Scottsbluff. My mom and stepdad used to live there, and I recall going there, driving from Lincoln during my college years, and I would go spend time out there during the holidays. So at the shortest days of the year, I was in Scottsbluff at the bottom of a canyon there in the Wildcat Hills, and I used to think how crazy it was that the sun would start to get dark because off to the west, the ridge there would block the sun, and it's I noticed it's starting to get dark out there. It's like 2:45, 3:15, and and I'm thinking that's nothing like Alaska. You guys, I mean, there's got to be times that I bet your outdoor activities, I bet your community calendars are completely 180 degrees different than the rest of the nation as far as what
It
you guys.
depends on what you're into. A lot of, well, you've got the mushing community, and they're of course very active in the winter. And you see them, you drive up and down the highway, you'll see them, running the trails along the highway. And I'll tell you, those dogs are never happier when they're out there running in the traces. I mean, you watch them; their ears are up, their tails are wagging. They just love to do it. Our neighbor
That's
Vern,
cool.
who runs sled dogs, says, "Oh yeah, those dogs they're never happier than when they're running."
That's so cool.
And
Uh,
people, snowmobile. Now we call them snow machines up here for reasons I've never been able to discover. We don't call them snowmobiles up here. We call them snow machines. I don't know why. And we keep thinking about buying one because in the winter you can go back on this, like I said, all of this borough and state land right behind us, and there's
oh,
hundreds of miles of trails to explore back there.
so this, y'all buckle up. So if you've been listening to Ward and you're thinking, all right, it sounds pretty cool. I like this Alaska thing. Maybe I'll move up there someday. Buckle up, because here comes some Alaska weather facts for you. Fairbanks. Let's see. The average high temperature for Fairbanks, so that's further north, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the month of January, okay, it's 1 degree. That's your average high temperature in January in Fairbanks is 1 degree. The average low is, it's not that bad, 17 below.
Yeah, that's tolerable.
Okay. Let's see. The highest temperature recorded in Alaska was at Fort Yukon in 1915. Did you hear that, global warming, folks? Not 2024. It was in 1915 when it got to 100 degrees in Fort Yukon. And let's see here. The lowest temperature ever recorded in Alaska back in 1971 at Prospect Creek Camp, minus 80 degrees. Get out my face. No, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ward. I'll see you in August.
Alaskans, we have a different outlook on temperatures. I always tell people you can spot the locals up here in like April, March not March, but in May and June, because if it gets above 50 degrees, the people you see in shorts and tank tops are the locals. And but when you get down in those kinds of temperatures, I mentioned earlier that we had 32 below, and we get 20 below fairly regularly. You get a cold snap, and once in a while a low pressure system will set in over the Gulf of Alaska, and it just sucks air out of the Arctic right down onto us. Okay. And that's when we get those 20, 25, 30 below zero nights. And there are jokes about it that said, like, when you can't go outside because your door is frozen shut, that's cold. When you have to take a hammer and chisel and cut a path through the air. When you see a bear with a rabbit and he's wearing it and not eating it.
Holy
there's a whole bunch of those little jokes about even Alaskans think it's cold. But one of my favorite ones, though, there's a famous place here in the valley, pardon me, called Miller's Market, and Miller's is nationally known for its soft serve ice cream. It's in all the tourist guides. They stop at Miller's in Houston, Alaska for ice cream. Well, my wife and I decided we wanted ice cream, and it was I think it was middle of December, so we went up to Miller's, and end up standing in a line. There's about 10 people in there in December waiting for ice cream, and it was about 7 degrees outside. Excuse me. And one woman in the line says, yeah. And one woman in the line says, this is funny. It's 7 degrees, and we're all standing here waiting for ice cream. And the man in front of her turned around, shrugged, and said, "We're Alaskans."
Right. Yeah.
I
tell you, okay. So you made me think of something, Ward. How often, and maybe it changes depending on the season, but let's just say it's, the middle of the winter. How often are you, and I know it'll change person to person as well, but how often are you having to drive somewhere? Like, do you stock up for the winter and then you batten down the hatches, or do you
to some extent, yeah. We load in, and of course we always keep bulk, like rice and dry beans and flour and so forth, just as a matter of principle. We generally buy our major grocery shopping once a month. We go down to Wasilla once a month and buy our primary groceries, and we try not to go to town anymore, any more than we have to. Although we have a local lodge that we go to for lunch every Saturday, and that's about a 20-mile drive, and we never miss that. So that's one given. And of course, we have to run into the post office every once in a while.
I love it. Do you basically probably recognize everybody you pass, huh?
Oh yeah. When you go to the post office, when I go in, and we don't get mail delivery because we're remote. We have to go into the post office to get our mail, and usually I know, or at least have seen, most of the people that I run into in the post office.
How often are you required to go in at a certain frequency to the post office? Like, do they say, "Hey, you got to come in here once a week or once a month, or we can't hold your mail"?
I don't think there's a requirement. We try and go in at least once a week and grab our mail. And if I have to go to the doctor, there's a little community clinic that's half-mile from the post office. So there's other things we have to do from time to time.
A lot of trip combining, huh?
Yeah. We try and do that. I see somebody asked if there's a Costco in Wasilla. There is not. There's one in Anchorage.
How far is that for you?
But that's 70 miles.
Oh, okay. So how are you keeping your vehicle warm and in driving condition? You got it hooked into a warmer? How's that?
We've got a garage. It's got a wood stove and a Toyo oil burner in it, so we don't have any problems with that. It's
okay.
And
so it's like a heated garage.
Our vehicles scrupulously, so
I bet you
keep them reliable. We always have, even when we lived in Colorado.
Right. I mean, that could cost you your life.
Yeah. Well, that's why they say in the winter you don't dress for the trip, you dress for the weather. Because if your car breaks down.
Let's see here. So, some say that during the Klondike Gold Rush in 1897, potatoes were so highly valued for their vitamin C content that miners traded gold for them. Wow. Holy crap. So anyway, obviously we had I didn't see that ahead
that's
of
one
time.
I don't think I've heard before, but it
Yeah,
wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah,
I do know that supplies were very dear to those guys.
But yeah, you mentioned earlier how thanks Russia, suckers.
Yeah.
We just found gold and later oil and natural gas, and I tell you,
Yeah,
and then
that's
you
got to
actually
sting a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, now we've got Tsar Vladimir the First over there looking across the Bering Strait and going, "Why did we do that?
Why do we do that?" And he's not even over the Cold War yet. He's certainly probably not going to be over Alaska either.
Oh no.
What was that? I wrote down something you said to me once about who is it that said I don't know what this is, but who control Alaska is what the most valuable
Billy Mitchell.
Okay.
Yeah, General Billy Mitchell in the 1930s said Alaska was the most strategic piece of real estate on the planet. And he made a good point, even not knowing how things were going to develop the way it is now. But I call Alaska the crown of the Pacific, because whoever holds Alaska controls the North Pacific. It's a great spot from which we can monitor everything that goes on. And the Russians tweak us up here. They'll fly those Bear patrol bombers, and those things can fly for a week. They're slow. They're about as stealthy as a cinder block to the head. But they're nuclear. They can carry nuclear cruise missiles, and they can fly forever. They've got an enormous range, and they love trolling down our coast with those things. But they've been doing that since the 50s. They've always done that. They always will. The Russians are just built that way, and the thing is, we do it to them too. We once in a while fly a couple of B-52s off Vladivostok and just kind of poke over at them. And this is the oldest game in the book. It's exercising navigational rights, and and they do it, we do it.
Yeah.
The Russians, I think I mentioned to you earlier, Putin's made noises about maybe, sometime we might try to take Alaska back. And our Governor Dunleavy said, you'll be dealing with about 500,000 armed Alaskans if you try.
Yeah. What's the population?
I don't think that would work as well for the Russians as they think it might. Like so many of those kinds of things.
Right. What's the current population of Alaska? Do you know?
About 733,000 as of the last census.
Okay, well, you keep selling it with stats like that, man. And we mentioned earlier the Battle of Attu Island. That needs to be made into a movie where the Japanese conquered the island, took American citizens hostage, tortured and killed a ham radio operator who wasn't doing what they wanted him to do. I mean, it is a movie waiting to happen. And like you said, Steven Spielberg, get on that. Alaska was reached by outsiders in 1741 when Danish explorer Vitus Johnson?
Vitus Bering.
Vitus. Wow. Oh, there it is. I get to his last name finally. There it is. The Bering Strait and the Bering Sea. Okay. And what is it? Vitus Bering?
I think it's Vitus.
Vitus. Okay. Sighted it on a voyage from Siberia. Let's see. Russian hunters began traveling to the state, and the first official Russian colony was founded in Kodiak Island in 1784. We talked about Seward's Folly. $7.2 million the U.S. Paid. I love how our greatest purchases, I'll make this a very brief comparison. It's like a fantasy football trade, like they actually came to us for these sales. We didn't go to them. They came to us. And then we were
Russia owed everybody in Europe money at that point. The Russian royalty was so inept and so corrupt. if they'd been anybody but commies, I almost would have been sympathetic for Lenin and those guys overthrowing them.
I love it.
As it is, I just can't.
Yeah.
They ended up making it worse.
What
But
I love that you guys celebrate every March 30th. It's as Seward's Day in Alaska
Yeah.
to commemorate the sale. That is so great.
yeah, we're pretty happy that that Seward pushed that through. A lot of people
Yeah.
thought he was crazy, but
Uh-huh.
they called it Seward's ice box. And
Seward's Icebox.
I
Let's see.
remember an apocryphal quote, and I've never been able to verify it, but apparently there was a Texas congressman when this was being debated, who said, something about, if we buy this, Texas will be replaced as the largest, North American holding for the United States. And I've always heard this report of a Texas congressman said, yeah, but if you melt all the ice, it won't be any bigger than Delaware, which of course is not true, but I can kind of see, I've spent enough time in Texas, I can kind of see that attitude.
Let's see here. So Alaska Day is October 18th. That holiday commemorates the official transfer of the territory. Wow, you guys love the days associated with that purchase. March 30th, the sale. October 18th is the transfer of the territory. And what day did Alaska officially become a state? Let's see here. January 3rd, 1959. Yep. You got all sorts of days that you can celebrate there.
A lot of our state legends began with that. There were a lot of people that you don't associate with Alaska. Nome had, I think it was Nome. Pretty sure it was Nome, had a lawman for a while named Wyatt Earp. And of course, Soapy Smith in Skagway met his unfortunate end, thanks to a guy who followed him to where they were trying to break up a meeting of miners, and they ended up killing each other. One of those Western legends. They shot at each other, and both were hit, and both ended up dying.
Wow. Okay, hold on. You got to tell me about this. This is fun. I like this fun fact. Anchorage is home to a unique spot. On Upper Huffman Road. Are you familiar with that? In Anchorage?
I've heard of it. I don't think I've ever driven up there and looked at it.
Okay, it's a Gravity Hill. It says here, the laws of physics don't apply, if only by illusion. A car in neutral at the bottom of the hill mysteriously rolls up instead of down. I think that's in Salt Lake City, Utah.
I know it's an optical illusion. I don't know how it works.
Okay.
There's a place in Colorado River in Colorado where a river, which river is that? Actually, I think it's the Colorado. It is the Colorado River as it goes past Steamboat Springs, where you would swear the river is running uphill.
Oh, wow.
And of course it's not. But if you drive from Steamboat Springs over towards Kremling, you go up a canyon and you'd swear that the river's flowing uphill. And I've hunted elk in that area for 30 years. I've driven up that highway thousands of times, and it still looks to me like, and I still go down and go hunting with my partner. We still hunt elk and deer up in Grand County, and I swear that river's running uphill, but of course it can't be.
Okay, so check this out. You ever heard of the Wendy Williamson Auditorium on the University of Alaska Anchorage campus? Said to be haunted, and there are many tales of strange events inside the theater. You ever heard anything like that?
I've heard, it's not a particular interest of mine, spooks and haints and hauntings and things like that. I've heard people talk about it. Yeah. Supposedly there's several different ghosts that inhabit that auditorium. It's kind of like supposedly the ghost of Oliver Winchester's daughter still hangs around that mansion in California that they built. There's a lot of those stories around.
Yeah. Well, and then I have this other article here, and here's the headline. It says, the truth behind the Alaska Triangle, where more than 20,000 people have disappeared. You got any thoughts on that?
The triangle or no, the bush swallows people up every year. There's people literally will just disappear. Sometimes it's hunters or fishermen or people out hiking or people drive, an ATV back someplace and they just vanish. And of course, if something happens to someone, let's just say they had a heart attack or something, an accident, and if they come to a bad end out in the bush, within a week, there's going to be nothing but some scattered bones. There's just too many things out there that will eat you.
I feel that's how I would end up going if I moved up
so,
there.
Someone in the comments I noticed mentioned the homeless encampments, and that's another thing. Anchorage, like so many of our big cities, is starting to have problems with homeless encampments. There's a lot of them. It's very sad. There's a lot of substance abuse in those encampments, but in Anchorage, there's also the problem is that they're drawing bears. Both black bears and grizzlies will come right into those homeless encampments because there's trash, there's food laying around, and a couple times already that's led to the bears being destroyed. Because when the bear starts associating humans with food, there's nothing else you can do. The bear's just being a bear. And they're just doing bear things.
So the homeless encampments that you talk about there, and somebody mentioned it earlier in the comments, it occurs to me, what's happening in January with these homeless people? Are they spending 4 months in a shelter?
A lot of them in Sullivan Arena, which is a big sports venue, but they needed that to use as a sports venue, so that couldn't last. There's a certain number of the homeless people in Anchorage are people who've come from some of the remote villages, either for a job offer that didn't work out or for medical treatment that they had to have, and then they can't get back. So there is actually a couple of charities around Anchorage, and I couldn't name off the top of my head, but they're actually working and trying to get these people back home to their villages or wherever they came from. Governor Dunleavy offered to buy a bunch of them one-way tickets to San Francisco and Los Angeles, which I thought was probably a pretty good idea.
I tell you, if I was homeless, I would save up my pennies and my dimes and get a one-way ticket to Miami. That way, if you're stuck outside, you're not in Alaska freezing to death. At least,
I think it was 46 last winter died of exposure. 46 homeless people in Anchorage, just froze to death.
Yeah. I want to hit this real quick. This article that talks about the Alaska Triangle. I got to read these sentences here just so we can throw this out there. Notable figures who have disappeared in the Triangle include two politicians, U.S. House Majority Leader Thomas Hale Boggs Sr. and Alaska Congressman Nick Begich, right?
Begich.
Okay.
His grandson is running for our House of Representatives seat right now.
That's why I know that name associated with Alaska. Okay. So on October 16th, 1972, the pair were flying alongside his aide, Russell Brown, and the pilot, Don Johns, in an aircraft from Anchorage to Juneau when they went missing. Despite a big search being carried out to try to locate the four, ultimately neither the bodies nor the plane were ever found. Of course, this sparked conspiracy theories as to what could have happened, particularly since Boggs was a Warren Commission member, which was the official body created to investigate the John F. Kennedy assassination. He apparently did not agree with the findings that the group had made. Bum, bum, bum. So there you go. I can imagine not being able to find a trace of the... We've been talking about how vast that state is. How many millions of acres did we say? Was it 600, 700 million? Was it?
Around that. And of course, it could have gone down in the water.
Very fair point. Because we also learned today that you have 3 million lakes in your state. Giant vegetables. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, because I was
going to say light aircraft all the time. We had two people killed in Wasilla. A light plane went down and crashed. And of course, last year, we only have one House of Representatives member. Our Democrat House member, Mary Peltola, her husband was killed last year in a plane crash. He was an outfitter, and he was literally flying out a load of moose meat and some antlers, and his plane took off and went right down over a ridge and crashed, and he died a little while later. And I don't agree with Mary Peltola. I will vote against her in November. I hope she goes back to Bethel and has a long, happy, healthy life outside of politics. But when her husband Buzzy was killed, party didn't matter. We were all Alaskans, and we all grieved with her.
Okay, you may have just answered my question then, because I was going to ask you. You have one congressional seat, so it's effectively a statewide office. Is that
It's
that
the
accurate to
at-large
say?
seat. Yeah.
Okay, so then how? Like I said, you may have just answered my question. How in the world does Alaska elect a Democrat to Congress? And
Ranked choice
I guess,
voting.
oh,
And that's on the ballot
yeah,
to be for repeal in November. And hopefully we can get rid of it because it also gave us another 6 years of Princess Lisa Murkowski, who
yikes.
is not very popular up here in the Valley. But Lisa, as a survivor, she has put together a coalition of Anchorage Democrats that know that their chances of getting a Democrat in the Senate is very slim. And she's enough of a squish that they'll bite their lip and vote for her. And she's kept. I mean, she won a write-in. She was primaried once under the old system, and she ran a write-in campaign and won. She knows how to play the game.
Who was the guy that almost won back in 2010, probably 12, 9, or I don't know, 10. Anyway, and he was running as an independent, and they were trying to defeat Obamacare. Is that Murkowski that somehow got off the deck and won that? And I forget, but it feels like some really fishy stuff was happening with that.
I think you might be thinking of Ted Stevens. Lisa was, Lisa Princess. We call her Princess Lisa because her father, Frank Murkowski, was a senator, and then he was elected governor, and he appointed Lisa to that Senate seat originally like a feudal title, and she's held it ever since.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Joe Miller. Murkowski won as a write-in, 39.
Yeah, Joe Miller
35
challenged her in the primary and won.
Yeah, and then she came back as a write-in.
Interesting thing, one of our major third parties up here is the Alaskan Independence Party, and which is like it sounds. Their policy positions are, possibly taking Alaska back to being territory, which has advantages and disadvantages.
Right.
But they maintain in part that the statehood wasn't legally done and should be voided. I don't quite agree with that, but they managed to get a governor elected.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Back in I think it was in the 80s or early 90s, the Alaskan Independence Party actually had a governor in office for 4 years.
Wow. That's kind of fun.
So they've got a fairly strong following for a third party.
I got to be honest with you. I'm sorry if I'm naive, but I just don't think of gardens or farming or anything like that when I think of Alaska. How in the world? I'm just going to read this little paragraph. At the Alaska State Fair, farmers show off their large veggies and compete for world records. Scott Robb still holds the record for his 138.25 pound cabbage presented in 2012. Scott and Marty Robb also hold the record for the world's largest turnip, coming in at 39 pounds, 3 ounces. All right, what is happening? Ward, how does that happen? How do you guys have big produce?
We have a short growing season, even here in South Central, but we make up for it with all those hours of daylight. And our produce tends to be a little sweeter, or so people claim, because of all those hours of daylight. And of course, photosynthesis produces sugars. That's what plants store as energy, and root vegetables. We're kind of limited in what we can grow. There's a lot of warmer weather crops that don't do well here. That's changing some now because the summers actually are getting a little warmer in Alaska. They have been since the last ice age. The climate. People say climate change isn't real. Well, climate change is real. The climate has always changed, and it always will. Whether humans are affecting it enough to justify giving up our modern lifestyle is quite another discussion. But as recently as I think it's the Miocene, which was about 20 to 30 million years ago, there was no ice at the poles. The Earth was quite a bit warmer. And even more recently, the Romans used to be able to grow wine grapes in Britain. Well, you can't do that now; it's too cold.
Citrus trees, yeah.
So the the summers in the last couple of decades have slowly been warming a little bit, and some of the native communities are starting to have increase the amount of land they're turning over for various crops. But around Palmer, there's a lot of truck farming goes on, potatoes, onions, that kind of thing. And yeah, I don't know if it's the long hours of daylight, but they do grow some impressive sizes. I think the state record for pumpkins is over a ton. They had to load the thing onto a flatbed truck with a forklift to bring it into the state fair in Palmer.
What? Oh my word! You have
I don't
me
know if you can
looking up.
eat a pumpkin. I don't know if it would be any good to eat or not, but boy, it's sure impressive.
So you said a phrase there that I just can't let go. What do you mean when you say truck farming?
Potatoes, carrots, root vegetables. That's what I've always thought of as truck crops. And I don't know where the term comes from. I suppose it might be because they're crops you can put in the back of a truck and drive out in a crossroads
Okay.
and sell.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. That makes sense there. Well, let's see. Gosh, man, this is fascinating. I'm looking at these pictures, and there isn't a U.S. state that doesn't have beautiful farmland. I mean, this is fascinating. Okay, so you mentioned the growing season. You said something else there that really, man, I wonder how you would go about finding produce from Alaska, because now I want to try the sweet, the sweeter.
I don't think we export much.
Okay.
If any.
Yeah.
A lot of food has to be imported, and that's the thing about Alaska. Stuff that comes up from the lower 48 is expensive. There's a lot of it comes up mostly in cargo ships from Seattle and some even from San Francisco. When my wife and I moved here from Colorado, we actually had to have our household stuff that was shipped up here actually went into a cargo container, went by rail to Seattle, went by ship to Anchorage, came out to us by truck. We don't manufacture anything in Alaska. There's no factories.
That doesn't sound cheap, Ward.
No, it's not. Stuff that comes up from the 48 can be expensive. For example, I collect. I'm a gun collector. I'm a licensed curios and relics collector. Most of the stuff I like to collect is old Belgian Brownings and pre-64 Winchesters, mostly pre-World War II, in fact. And I can have those shipped directly to me because I'm a licensed collector. But having a shotgun shipped to me from, say, Texas might cost $100, where when I lived in Colorado, it was $25 to have a gun shipped to me. That's just one example. Most of our gasoline comes from the lower 48. We ship truckloads of oil down there. They refine it. They ship tanker loads of gasoline and diesel back to us. Our gasoline right now is running about $3.60, $3.75 a gallon, in that range. We're sitting on an ocean of petroleum. If we had refineries, I bet it'd be under $1 a gallon because we've just got so much of the stuff.
So what's holding up the refineries there? Please don't say environmentalists.
Environmentalists and permitting. I can't remember. Is that one of the is permitting reform one of the ideas that Kamala Harris has stolen from Donald Trump? And
there it is.
I just wrote an article this morning at Red State about how she is a Rorschach test. So many of her supporters she's so vague that so many of her supporters look at her and just see what they want to see because she's basically an ink blot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good.
And I know Trump a while back joked that he should send her a MAGA cap for all of the ideas that she's stealing.
Yes. Let's talk about the largest salmon ever caught in the Kenai River. 97 pounds, 4 ounces. All right. What is happening there?
I'm not sure what it is about the Kenai, and I've done a lot of fishing down there. In Alaska, if you fly into Anchorage, they tell you if you're looking for fishing, you go south. If you're looking for hunting, you go north. The Kenai Peninsula has some of the best fishing in the world. In the middle of summer, sometimes you'll get into what they call combat fishing, where people are literally standing shoulder to shoulder along the bank. I see someone mention dip netting. I'll get to that in a moment. But for some reason, there's several rivers. The Russian, the Russian flows into the Kenai at basically Cooper Landing, and the Kasselhof. I fished all those rivers, and but for some reason, the king salmon in the Kenai. Now, kings are big fish. They're the largest of the Pacific salmon species. But for some reason, the ones that breed in the Kenai, I don't know if it's diet or what it is, because of course they spend most of their life at sea. But they get really big. They get bigger than kings in any other that run in any other river in the state, and I don't know why that is.
Wow.
I don't know if it's something about their diet, something about who knows, the pH content in the water, even because these are all glacial rivers, and the Kenai River is this beautiful turquoise color because of something unique about the glacial silt in the area where it runs through.
Wow.
But for whatever reason, the kings in that river are enormous. And,
okay. And what is this dip netting? Tamara was asking about?
There's a couple of weeks every summer where if you've lived in Alaska for over a year and are eligible for an Alaska fishing license, they have what they call the personal use fishery. There's places down in the Kenai Peninsula in the mouth of the Kenai River, and I think the Kasselhof too. And there's a couple up in other places where you can literally go with a dip net and shovel salmon out onto the bank. And I think last I checked, it was 35 salmon per resident. So my wife and I, between us, could take 70 salmon. And people fill their freezers. We haven't done it because in the Susitna River, the dip netting areas are only accessible by boat, and we don't have a boat. And we have neighbors that do it, and they come back with so much they're coming around going, please take some salmon.
Oh, really?
Needed to. There's only the two of us, and we don't eat a lot. And so the guy that does our handyman work for us this year said, hey, I went down to the dip net and I just got tons of huge fish. Do you guys want 10 pounds of salmon? So sure.
That's good stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
But it is a thing that they do, and if you're eligible for the license, you can go do that. And
how about the Pribilof Islands, largest aggregation of northern fur seals? About half of the world's northern fur seals head to those islands to breed or haul out. So I mean, wow, that's a concentration.
I've heard it's very noisy.
I bet it is.
But those are
I got
those
49
are some loud animals.
49 fun facts. This is the funnest right here. This is mine right here, number 42. Alaska does not have a state sales tax. Now, I will also note that Alaska doesn't have a state income tax. So I ask you, how can that be? I've heard that if you don't have if you don't tax everything, how could you even exist as a state? How do you guys pull it off up there, Ward?
To some extent, it's oil and gas lease fees on state land. That's a part of it. And excuse me, a lot of the towns, Wasilla has a sales tax. I think it's 3.2%. Palmer has a sales tax. Anchorage does not have a sales tax. I take that back. They're considering one. So some of the municipalities get along that way. But part of it, and Alaska actually has a reverse state tax. We have the permanent fund disbursement. Alaska has, the permanent fund, which is largely from leases. They're and so forth that the state assigns, and each Alaska resident gets the permanent fund disbursement every year. And last year it was $1,300 and change. My wife and I each got that amount. This year it's supposed to be $1,700 and change. It's negotiated between the state legislature and the governor every year, by statutory requirements and so forth. But part of it is, and speaking as a guy with awfully strong libertarian leanings, is much of Alaska, especially outside the towns, we're running a pretty effective minarchy. We have a borough council. They don't do much. The borough runs the schools. They take care of road service on the side roads, like where we live. They've got a few road graders and some guys to drive them. The fire service is volunteer. The borough pays for the buildings and the equipment, and that's about it. That's about all they do. Like I said, there's no state, there's no borough sheriff or sheriff's deputies. There's no law enforcement. Our property taxes are, I think our property taxes are, we own 2 lots, and I think they're about $2,200 a year, and that covers the schools, because the borough does run the schools out here. We have, our elementary school, and there's a high school in Houston that encompasses the area. So part of it is that in most of the state, the government doesn't even do a whole lot. And a big part of the state is in what they call the unorganized borough, which means there's not even a borough council. There's just nothing out there. If you need help, you can call state police, but it might be a couple hours before they can get there.
Yeah, you had me at the government doesn't do a whole lot out here. Oh, please.
And we kind of like it that way.
Yes. Oh, gosh. Okay. You talked about how it's been getting warmer the last couple of decades. I mean, that's just going to encourage more people like me to move up there. It's just
it's never going to be Miami
habitable.
Beach.
No, I don't need that. I need Nebraska, Montana, Idaho-ish. If you can give me that weather.
Well, I like I said, I grew up in Northeast Iowa, and I was a child of the 60s and 70s, and I can remember summer days where it was so still and so hot and so humid that you could literally hear the corn creaking as it grew. And you could take a shower, step out of the shower, and towel off, and you're wet again already because it was so humid. Now, the only place I've felt that was worse is I've done a lot of work in Japan back in the days when I was consulting, and I love Japan. My wife speaks Japanese and reads it, so she gets along very well over there. But the first time I went to Japan, I ended up in Kyoto, got there in the middle of the night, rode the train down to Kyoto, and woke up in the morning, decided to go outside, and the hotel, of course, is air conditioned. And I swear, when you walked out, and it was just at the end of the monsoon season, and you could feel it, it went splash when you walked outside. I've never felt humidity like that before.
Yeah, gosh.
But we have humidity here, but nobody cares because it's 60 degrees, and you don't even notice it.
Yeah. How about you ever spent any time in Houston, Texas?
Not Houston, no. San Antonio, and back again when I was consulting, I had a client in Palestine, if you know where that is, and after my first experience there, and that's out in those piney woods in East Texas. After my first experience there, I told him I would only come see him between October and March. I was not coming out there.
Amen. Let's see. According to the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute, seafood is the economic foundation of many rural communities where more than 21,200 residents, or 15% of all rural working-aged individuals, were directly employed by the industry. So 15% of rural folks in Alaska work in the seafood industry. That's not shocking at all. Alaska has the most commercial fisheries in the U.S., 5 species of salmon, 4 species of crab, cod, shrimp, halibut, and more are harvested in Alaska. Oh my gosh, just reading that sentence makes me hungry. Prudhoe Bay, North America's largest oil field. It's up on the north coast there. What's the story with ANWR? We've been playing this little game for decades in Washington, D.C. Talk to us as someone who's very familiar with the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge. Did I get all that?
Yep.
Talk to me. Talk to us about that.
Well, the problem we're going to have increasingly. Let's how can I put this? Every presidential administration either opens it up or shuts it down. Opens it. It's the same with the Keystone Pipeline. You might remember that when Biden came into office and he says, "Okay, we're going to stop the Keystone Pipeline," and really the president can only stop one part of it, but it's the part that crosses from Canada into the U.S. And after that, it's a state issue. But and it got to the point where the oil companies are going to go, you know what, we're not going to put any more money into this. Even if you say we're opening up permitting, it's not worth it because the next guy comes in and he's going to shut us down again. And it costs billions to develop these oil fields. It's years before they start seeing any return from it. And you get these politicians who are, oh, they're gouging oil prices. Like, you don't. And I don't work in the oil industry. I never have, but a lot of people around here do. There's a lot of people in our area who spend winters up on the slope because that's when they do a lot of the work because it's frozen. In the summer, you'd sink right into the tundra.
Oh, wow.
And it's a big part of our economy, but Washington has just over the last years been schizophrenic about it. And you never know what the next guy is going to do. Trump, please let him get reelected because the alternative is unthinkable.
Right.
But he'll be friendly towards that and be willing to open up development. But what happens when he's done in 4 years? He's finished. Hopefully, JD Vance runs. Or if he doesn't, Ron DeSantis, somebody like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you never know when the Democrats might come up with someone who appears to be sane and looks so good by comparison with the people they've been running that they might actually win. I mean, that's setting the bar pretty low.
No kidding. Yeah. And in the United States, we used to be such a model of stability. But you're right. When you have schizophrenic policies.
My dad he always said he was a Truman Democrat. But my dad's been gone for some time now, but he wouldn't recognize the Democratic Party today.
Oh, no.
He'd think they were crazy. No. And this is a guy who voted for Ronald Reagan twice. Dad didn't talk politics much, but I do know that he did. He liked Reagan's style, and he was sick of Jimmy Carter. And then 4 years later, he told me things are going really, really well. So why would you change horses now?
Sure. Yeah. But but specifically talking about Anwar, give people kind of because I think this gets lost in the discussion is how vast of a region that is. The small part that's the drilling area.
Yeah,
give us a
it's a huge area, but the area that's actually set aside for development is about the size of Denver International Airport. It's like 1.1% of the entire area that's open. Now they have technologies like vertical drilling. They can go for miles and miles and miles and recover from one location. So it's not nearly as intrusive to the environment as people like to have you believe. And also, so many of these commercials that are fighting, saying that are against that. They show these beautiful mountain ranges and forests, and Anwar is a tundral plain. It's a bog in the summer, and just a frozen solid flat sheet of ground in the winter. It has a beauty of its own, but it's not like they portray it.
And most of these,
I always tell people, most of these the real radical environmentalists, none of them actually live out in the environment.
Mm-hmm.
So some of us live out in the environment, and we want clean air and clean water. That's why we live out here. We love the natural world, but you also have to be realistic about it. You were talking a while back about Kodiak bears, and there was a guy named Tim Treadwell. They actually made a movie about him. He's known up here in Alaska as that idiot Tim Treadwell because he and his girlfriend hung around in Kodiak, and he thought bears were harmless, big, fuzzy things, and he would crawl up to them on his hands and knees and so forth and crooning to them, and he filmed himself doing this. And he also caught on film the bear that ate him and went and killed his girlfriend and ate her too. Those are the kind, and of course, he was from California. Those are the kinds of people that oppose these kinds of things. They have very unrealistic expectations about what the natural world is really like.
Right. You talked about the enormous costs that these oil companies put into drilling and setting up these areas. I was just reading here, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline stretches more than 800 miles. Now, I don't know how much this cost. I don't know. And this was in the 60s and 70s here. But here we go. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline passes over rugged terrain, including 3 mountain ranges from Prudhoe Bay to Valdez. More than 18 billion barrels have moved through the pipeline. The pipeline project involved 77,000 workers. Hello, jobs. from 1969 until its completion in 1977. How much did it cost to build the Alaskan pipeline? And the survey says $8 billion. Oh my gosh! Wow,
It was worth every penny.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But again, that's under a more stable nation that isn't swinging like a pendulum back and forth. Now,
and it was a nation that hadn't gone crazy over the ideas of renewables. And I've done a fair amount of writing on this. This is one of my beats at Red Strait is renewable energies, and it's just not tenable to replace oil and gas. If the watermelons in the green movement, and I call them watermelons because they're green on the outside and red on the inside, if those people were serious about low carbon emissions energy, they would be favoring the building of nuclear power plants, because every major advance in human technology has come with an increase in energy density, from burning wood to burning coal to burning oil to natural gas. Well, the highest energy density we can achieve today is with nuclear power. And we should be building reactors like crazy right now. It might even make electric cars practical in a lot of areas. Not here, because you lose 60% of your battery range when it's 20 below zero. But
probably not
for a lot of people in big cities that commute back and forth to work every day with cheap reliable nuclear energy, it might be practical for a lot more people.
I found this stat fascinating about Alaska. More than 10,000 active pilots. More than 1% of the state's population has some level of certification. That's 3.6 times higher than the U.S. average. And that would make sense, right? Explain why it makes sense there'd be so many pilots in your state.
Alaska is what it is because of civil aviation. It really changed life in the little bush communities and a lot of the native settlements. Almost every one of these little villages has a gravel or a grass, airstrip, and they plow it in the winter, and the planes can land with skis. And it's opened up the state. These guys, a lot of these guys still are navigating by seat of their pants. They follow a river or so forth. And they know. I
don't know that I would want to trust that guy,
And they can't get lost because they know they're in Alaska. And the tourism aspect is there. A lot of these guys are flying people out to remote areas to hunt moose or to hunt caribou or to fish. That's a big part of the tourism industry, or just glacier tours. They'll fly you out up around Denali and fly you over the glaciers, and there's beautiful views and so forth. But a lot of it is just trade. These bush communities are heavily dependent on aviation. Someone once told me, I've never been able to verify it, but the Douglas DC-3, which in military livery was the C-47, and the C-47 is slightly different. It's set up more as a cargo plane than a passenger plane. But I think the last one of those they built was in 1949. Over half of the existing DC-3s and C-47s that are still in use are in use in Alaska, because they carry big loads. They're simple and reliable. They're a small aviation company somewhere can maintain them easily, and they can land anywhere. They can land on a gravel strip and with their big tires and turn around and take off again. But this state, I mean, if we were relying on boat travel or overland travel, life would be much, much different in a lot of these communities. Places like Nome, like Kotzebue, like Haines, they're able to be a large part of the modern world because this regular air traffic in and out.
Yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense. The state has 4 times the number of airports per square mile as the rest of the nation. Like you said, many places in Alaska are only accessible by air or water. And I was looking up Lake Hood in Anchorage is the world's largest and busiest seaplane base, with over 1,000 seaplanes that are housed there. That's amazing. Yep. We talked about gold being what Alaska may be most known for, but your biggest export, mineral export, is zinc.
So a lot of people don't know that, but yeah, zinc is a huge thing up here. We have some of North America's biggest zinc deposits in Alaska.
That's so cool. And these fun facts, and I'm going to post these on my Twitter at Keith Malinak, to go along in conjunction with this awesome conversation here with Ward Clark today. It's from Gray Line Alaska's Rail Tours. So this rail tour company put out these facts. I mean, these are just these have just been fun to go through with you, and then adding in your knowledge up there. I tell you, have we covered pretty much the entire state in our conversation today, Ward? Or
Oh,
is
I
there
think so.
more?
Yeah.
I tell you, I seriously, it won't be long before I'm calling you. I was like, I'm coming to Alaska, dude. I hope you're in town. I
No,
will
yeah,
definitely
please,
let you know if I
please
ever
do let us know.
if I ever make it up
'Cause
there. The
we
problem
love to
is,
have visitors.
yeah, okay. Well, the problem is I will never leave. So you'll have to kick me out.
Well,
But
that was the problem my wife and I had when we first started coming up here. Every time it was getting harder and harder to leave and go back to that big, noisy, smelly city. And finally, we'd planned this for 20 years. We saved, we looked at all the different areas where we'd get the most bang for our real estate buck, and
I bet. Yeah,
we made it
well,
happen. And
that's
like I
so
said,
cool.
Colorado's changed a lot, and it changed horribly for the worse in the 30 years I lived here. But we didn't leave Colorado. We weren't running away from something. We were running to something. We
Yeah.
didn't move away from Colorado. We moved to Alaska.
Gotcha. Well, you may have more people join you depending on how this election goes in November, man.
Yeah.
Ward Clark, ladies and gentlemen, please check out all of his writings over at redstate.com. Follow him on Twitter at The Great Lander. Also follow him on Truth Social at The Great Lander, and also on Rumble, where he has his Animal Magnetism Live. That's I gotta go check that out, man. That sounds like a lot of fun. Ward Clark, please keep in touch. Thank you for the conversation today, all about Alaska. It's
Thank
been
you,
a
Keith.
true pleasure and an education. And I'm telling you, man, I'm going to be up there before you know it. Okay.
Anytime.
Sure thing. Thanks for making time. To you and to the audience, appreciate it. Please share with your friends and family all the episodes that you find intriguing, and follow both myself and Ward there on the social media. All right, kids, we'll see you all tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern for the Friday live stream. Until then, please do take it easy and